It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody, starring the irrepressible Andrew Bernstein and the robust Robert Begley. I am Andrew Bernstein, and you are indubitably Robert Begley. How you doing today, Robert?
Oh, Andy, I'm doing great today. Happy to celebrate a giant, larger than life, literally larger than life figure who you have been wanting to celebrate for some time. But since it's the month of July, which is the month of America, I think we're going to focus on American heroes throughout this month.
Good idea. We're talking, of course, about the great Marion Morrison, right? Better known to the world as John Wayne, or Duke.
Yes.
1907 to 1979, I think, were Duke's years.
Yes.
A Hollywood icon, a legend of filmmaking, a movie star who topped the charts, for decades, in popularity and in money making, and somebody who was definitely a patriotic American, who loved America at its best. And so Duke definitely deserves a Hero Show episode, in my estimation.
Yes, and we will do him justice because the man, he faced a lot of adversity, a lot of controversy. He said some things that certainly in today's day and age, I mean, there's a reason when they name an airport after you, Andy, you think you've landed someplace in life. And then when everyone every 5 minutes wants to tear down that airport name and statue, I think your stature is even higher, frankly, because it's the bad guys who want to tear him down. So yeah, let's talk about talk about John.
As I was saying, when we get to the end of the show,
Yes.
Robert, we've never shied away from criticizing our heroes for moral flaws. And things that John Wayne said in that infamous Playboy interview, we should discuss.
We will.
But never, heroes sometimes have flaws and sometimes moral flaws. Nevertheless, John Wayne's a giant of Hollywood, in my judgment, a very underrated actor. And let's discuss. I know his movies. I loved his movies at the time I was a little kid. I don't know much about his life. I know he was born 1907. Marion Morrison. Was it in Illinois or Iowa? Where was he?
Iowa. And his mother, he could never impress her enough, gave him a female name kind of on purpose. She wanted a girl and gave him a female name.
Like a boy named Sue, right? That's Johnny Castle.
Right. And he loved his father. Sadly, they separated young in life. He was always big. He was always athletic, had a younger brother named Robert, who he loved and helped him out throughout his life. But yeah, so he had a dog, a terrier dog. That's everywhere he went. Right. And these local firemen saw him and they called him Big Duke and Little Duke. And so the nickname,
the Airedale's name was Duke, right? The dog's name was Duke.
The dog's name was Duke. And so the dog was Little Duke and John Wayne's Big Duke, I guess, unless the dog was bigger than him and he was that small.
Airedales aren't that big. And John Wayne turned out to be a big dude. So he was probably big as a kid.
Yes, yes. And was athletic in school, ended up playing football, got a scholarship to play football got a scholarship at USC. And while he was surfing, this is now we're in Southern California. He went immediately, young in life, they moved to Southern California, the family. And he wanted to play on the football team. He got this injury, lost his scholarship at USC. But one of the things they did, they wanted the players to get used to the Hollywood set. And this is where I believe he first met John Ford, who would become his father in so many ways. John Ford, the famous actor. We talked about him briefly in the Midway episode, because in the more recent film Midway, they show him filming while the Japanese are dropping bombs. So that's a little bit about John Ford.
Yeah, we have to do a Hero Show episode on John Ford also at some point, because he's one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history. Won 4 Oscars for Best Director in a time when Hollywood handed out those awards generally based on merit, not on wokeness or political correctness.
Yes.
So those 4 best directors, and he was nominated a whole bunch of other times. He probably could have won a whole bunch of other times. He was that great a director. By the way, one
Yeah.
point I just want to say before you continue with John Wayne's biography. Orson Welles, the boy genius of Hollywood, said when he was preparing to do Citizen Kane, he watched Stagecoach, a John Ford movie, which was the movie that propelled John Wayne to stardom. He said Orson Welles said he watched Stagecoach 40 times, studying John Ford's techniques. John Ford's one of the great directors of Hollywood history, and he deserves a hero episode in his own. But anyhow, so go back to Duke's. Go back to Duke's
So
life.
he's young, he's hungry, he's ambitious. He doesn't think he can act. He's physically fit, and he's hanging around the Hollywood sets to do like part-time work, getting things, nailing things, doing handiwork. And then we're in 1930, and they're filming this film called The Big Train. And this is the era where we talked about this with Howard Hughes in the past. We're going from the silent era to the talkies. And Wayne is, they want him. They see his physicality and they're like, that's the guy we want. But he's got this somewhat high-pitched voice, and he's not confident at all. He's like, I can't act. So the director tells him, go to the Mulholland Hills and shout until your voice is hoarse, basically. and he comes back and he's got that deep, rugged, by the way, the thing about John Wayne, the rugged individualist, the frontiersman, the Americana, I mean, that word, that expression fits him more than anybody, and that's why he's Americana. But so he's got this deeper voice, and they give him this part in this film called The Big Trail, and he just goes on from there and ends up working with John Ford. We get to 1939.
At some point they changed his name from Marion Morrison to John Wayne.
That's right. That's right. Without him knowing. Without him even knowing. It was the same. I'm sorry, his name escapes me. Walsh. The guy's name was Walsh. They call him Duke Morrison for a short period of time, and then they changed his name to John Wayne. Possibly the John came from John Ford. Actually, there's some evidence that might be the case, and so he does The Big Trail. He does 82 films until 1939, Stagecoach, which you alluded to. Now, 1939 was a great year for films. We have The Wizard of Oz,
Gone with the Wind,
and Gone with the Wind. In so let me just backtrack, Andy. In my family, I grew up in a film family. My father was assistant film editor, and Gone with the Wind was known as the greatest movie ever. It was like hands down.
And
I was too young.
Your brother's a real artsy film kind of guy.
My brothers, my sister, and one of my sisters, Andy, I got to admit, she would say out loud, John Wayne is not an actor. Okay, I'd be sitting looking at the movie.
No, that's not.
No, I wouldn't know, Andy. I'm like 5, 6 years old, but I see, I'm like, wait a minute, all the other guys on the screen are actors, but the big guy is not one. Like, I don't, so I had a bias against him not being an actor until I got a little older and made my own decisions. And I was like, no, I think he qualifies.
Yeah, I gotta say something here, because this is, I've heard this from the time I was a little kid and always stuck in my craw. But before I even do that, before I stand up for John Wayne as an actor, I want to say, speaking of Gone with the Wind, that my all-time favorite actor as a leading man is Clark Gable. I would take Clark Gable. You've said
that before, yes.
Yeah, I'll take Clark Gable over anybody. That's the guy who wanted to play Howard Rourke in the Fountainhead. I think Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood. I think Clark Gable's terrific. But with John Wayne, I heard what I was, when I you could tell this gets me emotional. So I'm a kid growing up in 1960s, and I was lucky in that way. 1961, I can remember vividly. That's the year the Eminem Boys, Mantle and Maris, chased Babe Ruth's record. Maris broke it. And John Wayne in the film, John Wayne was alive and healthy and churning out one Western after another that I got to see in the movie theaters. And the great Westerns he did before my lifetime were all on TV. Stagecoach.
And the war movies too, Andy, by the way, just so you, both of them, the heroes of both. Yeah. He's either a soldier or a Western, law and order.
Frontier sheriff or marshal or something. and all the ones he did before, you're old enough to remember the Late Show, right? That on CBS after the 11 o'clock news, the Late Show was on NBC.
Yeah.
Johnny Carson was on, and Johnny Carson was great. But I was always more of a movie guy than a talk show kind of guy, and I would often watch the Late Show. I didn't want to. I'd watch the Late Show, and then the late show, then the late show. I didn't want to get up in the morning and go to high school anyway. Although my mother had this funny idea that I should get up and go to school, but that's another story for another day.
Yes.
But I see all these John Wayne westerns. Many of them directed by either John Ford or Howard Hawks. John Ford's Cavalry trilogy, Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, Rio Grande, which was the first movie he made with the great Maureen O'Hara. By the way, they made a lot of movies together. The Howard Hawks films, Red River, Rio Bravo. Yeah, these and I'd hear people would say, John Wayne's not an actor, or he just plays himself. And look, there's a technical term in philosophy for such beliefs. It's called bullshit. John Wayne is an excellent actor. I never walked away from a John Wayne movie thinking, how'd this guy get a job in film? And there are other people, I won't mention their names, there are other people I walked away from thinking exactly that. How'd they get a job making movies? Never with a John Wayne movie. He was always very professional. Is he Laurence Olivier or Charles Lawton or Anthony Hopkins? Is he going to play Hamlet on stage? I doubt it. But in the roles he played in the movies, he was great. He wasn't just a good actor; he was a great actor. I can see it in The Searchers, where he plays this racist against the Indians, who then changes as the movie goes on, and he's talking about this horrendous, rape and murder, and it's just, what do you want me to do? Draw you a picture? I mean, he's so powerful.
Yes.
It's so powerful. He's terrific in these roles.
Yeah.
It's so unjust. This rap against John Wayne that he just played himself, or that he wasn't a good. I couldn't go up on a screen and do that. He could do, because he was more than just a movie star. He was an actor, and he finally Hollywood. He was nominated for several Academy Awards, for Best Actor, and finally won. I don't remember which of his earlier movies. He certainly should have been nominated for The Searchers, as far as I'm concerned, and he was not. But he finally wins for True Grit, 1969, after being a mega star for 30 years. I got the impression, and True Grit's a great film, and he was great as Rooster Cogburn, and he deserved the Oscar that he won. But I think Hollywood also had a little sense of guilt by that time. We should have honored John Wayne long before this, and they should have. Okay, so I just wanted to get that in. John Wayne was a terrific actor.
I'll elaborate
in the roles he played.
So two things, Andy, two additions to that. John Wayne himself says, I'm not an actor, I react. I react to whatever the scene requires, okay, which is acting,
that's what actors do.
Yeah. And John Ford, boy, this book that I finished, it's called American Titan.
You want to hold it up so people can see?
Let me show you here. John Wayne, American Titan, talks about how John Ford would belittle him in front of everybody. At every point, they had done several movies together before Stagecoach, and they were famous actors in Stagecoach. And even though it's Wayne's 82nd movie, he's still a newcomer. Okay, 1939. Here we are. So he's like 32 years old, still like super young, and a young 32.
And Claire Trevor got the top billing in Stagecoach.
Right. Yeah. So he's Ringo, right? His character's name is Ringo.
Yeah.
And so John Ford would get him so upset and like dig into him, curse him out, make him, you suck at acting.
John Ford was a tough guy.
But what did it do? This had two effects. It made John Wayne want to work harder. Okay, that's what tough love is when it's effective. And also it made the other actors who were more renowned feel sorry for John Wayne, feel sorry for this newcomer who's got this big role. So in some psychological twist, John Ford really helped John Wayne become a good actor, a great actor, eventually. So that's a little backstory on what they went through.
Yeah, let's talk about Stagecoach for a minute.
Yeah.
It's 19,
Oh, yeah.
1939. John Wayne was, unknown, certainly as a leading man, he was
Yes.
unknown. From what I've read, the studio wanted Gary Cooper, an established star in that role. And I'm sure Cooper,
Yeah.
would have done a good job in that role. But John Ford, like you said, had directed John Wayne before in smaller roles. He stood up, for John Wayne in that movie. And he said something like John Wayne's going to become the biggest star of all because the way he portrays, the American everyman,
Yes.
so effectively. But Stagecoach is a terrific movie. As a reason why Orson Welles watched it 40 times.
I agree.
While he was preparing to make
Mhm.
Citizen Kane, he said,
Mhm.
it's like this it's like the story of America, and all, in a microcosm, because Claire Trevor, the star, she was a big star back then, got top billing. She plays how do we put this together? A working girl, right? And as she's being run out of town by the what was it? The organization for the law and order, organization. All these women, all of these puritanical women who want, who want the sex worker, the prostitute out of town. And when somebody says you're Apaches, you could attack the stagecoach. I remember she has the immortal line. She's looking at the Law and Order League. She says, Claire Trevor says, there are things worse than Apaches. She says.
Yeah.
But it's this movie about redemption. And there's the doctor who's a drunk, was Thomas Mitchell, I think, was a star. Back then, there's the working girl, and there's the story of how they're all Americans though, and the only downside in the movie to me was who's the bad guy other than the Apaches, the businessman who's a crook. He's got to go off to prison, but the businessman are crooks. He's got to go off to prison. But everybody else, can everybody else across the stratum of American life. There's the pregnant army wife. There's the working girl. There's the drunken doctor. There's the whiskey salesman. And all of these guys, whatever their flaws are, they could all be redeemed. It's like, and the whole theme of the movie is like America can be this redemptive place for people who, and we could live together in peace. We could overcome our moral flaws and accept each other and live together equally. And it's just this very, other than the anti-business prejudice in the film, which unfortunately John Ford, includes in the film. It's this great story of America and what America can do for people who want to live. How America is the place for people who want to redeem themselves, overcome whatever flaws or errors they made, and live a good life. And of course, the John Wayne character, the Ringo Kid, he's in love with Dallas, is the working girl's name, right? The Claire Trevor character. He's and in fact, what you've done in the past, I'm gonna go kill these guys who killed my father and brother. And it's like we wash the past away, and we can, and we can live together happily. He proposes to her, it's very touching. And then you see her, it's like the prostitute with the heart of gold theme. The army wife has her baby, and Dallas, the prostitute, she's protecting the baby from the Apache attack. And I think the John Wayne character says to her, "I've seen you with that. I know who you are." She says, you don't really know who I am. And the John Wayne character is, "I know who you are. I saw you with that baby, another woman's baby." And it's very touching.
Yeah, I agree, Andy. And a couple of things, if we backtrack a little bit to his personal life. So he meets in the early 30s, Josie Sainez, a Panamanian daughter, the daughter of a Panamanian diplomat. And they fall in love, and Wayne wants to marry her, but he's an unemployed actor, basically. And the father's like, "Nope, you're not good enough for my daughter," basically. And there's this back and forth. And then he's getting more and more traction, does marry her, starts to make a little bit of money. But then 7 years later, at the height of his first night of acclaim, which is the Stagecoach, at least the night of the Oscars, boom, she files for separation. So he's got this up and down within his life. And his father had passed away a couple of years earlier, who he called a noble man. He called his father. He had only good things to say about his father. So he has personal turmoil as well while he's going through the stages of his career. And of course, you build that into your craft. You build those experiences into your craft as someone who was married and the marriage didn't work out. He's got kids. By 1939, he has his son, was his son Patrick, who would be in 11 movies with him. He was a family man. Literally, he would have his daughter and his son in his movies, kind of like
Clint Eastwood did. Clint Eastwood
a generation later. And
yeah.
there are some. We'll bracket the Clint Eastwood John Wayne parallels and divisions because it is interesting, especially since we covered Clint on the Heroes Show, my first episode on the Heroes Show. So Stagecoach happens. He's on a roll. Now more movies are coming out. But what else is coming? The war, World War II. And everyone's drafted. Everyone is going in to fight or at least be a part of the war. But John Wayne doesn't. He's got 4 children, and the directors and producers don't want him literally fighting and risking.
He's 30. He's also 34 by the time the United States
yes.
enters World War II.
So Andy, I want to just discuss this because first of all, the draft takes everybody, and it has no ability and personal. What you're really good at. The military draft just cuts that off, and they just want everyone to go and fight. And during the war years, 41 to 45, John Wayne made 14 films, okay? And his role was to show the heroism, the American public, the heroism. And part of that was because many of the other leading actors were across, international. They were traveling. And he went, he did his duty to be like with the USO, but some of the, military people who were actually fighting did not like him. He would get booed at different places. But as a loyal American, the way I look at it, Andy, is he did the right thing. He showed where his talents lie, and there are psychological aspects of a war that we always need heroes in life, and if we're not finding them, directly in the daily news, we go to the movies to see them.
Yeah, and John Wayne had just become a star. 1939, and the U.S. is dragged into the war in 1941. He made a lot of World War II movies, like you said. Some of them during the war, right? They weren't after the war. And I think you're right. The morale at home for supporting the war effort, gaining money for war bonds and everything. This is the best use of John Wayne's talents, rather than having him in the Marines, in charge in the shore Guadalcanal.
The Longest Day. Years later, that's what The Longest Day was about. Right?
What a great movie. Yeah, John Wayne's got a great role. But that was 1962. That was long after the war. But there's different ways to support the war effort. And some of these Hollywood people, I got to give them credit. Just to go off on a tangent here for a second, Marlene Dietrich, who is from Germany, but came to America, became a big.
The two of them were at it. John Wayne and Marlene Dietrich definitely had.
They had an affair, right?
Yeah.
But Marlene Dietrich was a loyal American against, and when she died, she wanted to be buried back in her homeland of Germany. But she was against the Nazis, and she did so much for the USO. She was a singer as well as an actress. Out on they said about Marlene Dietrich that she spent more time at the front than Eisenhower did, entertaining the troops and building morale. There's different ways to support the war effort. I give a lot, 2 thumbs up for Marlene Dietrich, who was a German national, although a converted American, naturalized American citizen. But John Wayne's war movies, I think, helped the morale and enormously, and built up, buy the war bond, support the American war effort. That was the. he was a very talented actor in those kinds of roles. That was the right use of his talents in supporting the war.
So the war is over. America wins, and he marries his second of three Latin wives that he had, Esperanza from Mexico. Mexico was a place to go. Howard, he was kind of despondent after the war, and Howard Hughes, the two of them knew each other. They kind of had a hot and cold relationship, but now that Wayne was free from his first wife, Howard Hughes is like, hey, take my private plane to Mexico City and meet Esperanza and do, and so they hit it off. They were together, and pretty much right after the official divorce of his first wife happened, he marries Esperanza, and now we're after the World War II is over. What's next? The Cold War. And part of the Cold War is the communist infiltration. And here's where I think John Wayne really stands stellar, because he never minced words about communism, the complete infiltration. He had no problem saying, naming names. He wanted them exposed. He wanted them run out of town because he glorified. I can paraphrase. I don't have the direct quote, but he's basically saying America is the land of opportunity, and you are using this land of freedom to espouse these ideas that will overthrow this land of freedom, and that's what I despise about you. Okay, and so therefore I will call you out, and that's a moral stance, Andy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We need to understand. Put it simply, communism is evil. It's just it's the exact same way that National Socialism is. It's a different version of totalitarianism.
Yes.
The Nazis are, this is race-based, race war totalitarianism. Communism is class war totalitarianism. But it's a totalitarian state that they're the worst murderers of history. It's evil. And anybody who supports communism is evil, and I'm going to tell them so to their face, like Joseph McCarthy did. And John Wayne stood up against the communists. And yeah, you're right, some moral stance. And there were people in Hollywood, Ayn Rand included, who were friendly witnesses at HUAC.
Gary Cooper.
Yeah, I think Clark Gable, Barbara Stanwyck, definitely Gary Cooper, Elia Kazan. There was some very, very good, Ayn Rand, there's some very, very good Hollywood talent who stood up against the communists. And John Wayne definitely one of them. There's a whole issue here. Should Congress be investigating, the Hollywood's, these are privately owned companies.
Free speech.
Free speech. But so I'm not in favor of a government investigation of this. But what I am in favor of is the Hollywood production companies clearing their own houses. So wait a minute. We're in the filmmaking industry. We are not in the industry of overthrowing freedom in the United States and establishing a totalitarian state. So you communists, we're not going to make these propaganda films. We're not going to have any communist, pro-Soviet propaganda in our movies. So you either accept that if you're going to work here, or get the hell out of town. And I think the Hollywood production company should have cleaned their house of members of CPUSA. The same way they should have cleaned the house if they had any Nazi writers or people who supported National Socialism.
Yeah.
They have every right as a private company to fire people, who are Nazis or communists who want to establish totalitarianism in the United States.
So from during that, he's still working, does those three films in the late 40s that we mentioned, Red River, Fort Apache. Then he does Sands of Iwo Jima.
Hold on a second. Wait. Let's discuss Fort Apache for a minute. What a great movie. John Ford, Henry Fonda, John Wayne, great film. And there's so many different elements to it. Rob. It's not just a Western shoot 'em up with the U.S. cavalry taking on these warlike Apaches. That's the backbone of the plot. But there's so much else going on. There's racism, there's class issues, there's romance. There's the plight of the Army wives, and John Ford weaves all of this into one fabric. Henry Fonda is great as this racist Army officer who has complete disdain for the Apaches or for the American Indians more broadly. John Wayne is great. And John Wayne, generally, not in the Searchers, but generally in his Westerns, I've seen a lot of them. he's generally very respectful of, the American Indians or the Native Americans. There's no real accurate term.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to stay with American Indians because I think it's less inaccurate.
In real life too. I'll mention when you're done. I'll give you an example in real life too, how he respected them. Go ahead.
Yeah, and those John Ford movies, they don't sugarcoat what these Western tribes were like. They show how warlike, aggressive, and brutal, the Apaches or the Comanches or the Sioux were. But at the same time, those movies are generally respectful. That some of these Indian war chiefs keep their word. They're men of honor. And John Wayne, the John Wayne character emphasizes that point to the Henry Fonda character, and it's a great. Fort Apache is a great movie. I think it's an all-time great movie. And John Wayne is the 4 minutes at the end. Spoiler alert.
Which Shirley Temple, by the way, Shirley Temple too, as
Shirley
a young
Temple.
adult.
Yes. Shirley Temple is in Fort Apache. Yes, she's Henry Fonda's daughter.
Yeah,
And,
no longer
Philadelphia Thursday. Her name is in the movie.
And he's like, marry that girl,
Yeah.
Get back out there and marry that girl.
Yeah, John Wayne says to the John Agar character, who in real life was married to Shirley Temple.
That's right. Yeah.
At that time. But yeah, there's the ending of Fort Apache is because the press is giving all this recognition to the Henry Fonda character, and John Wayne knows he was a racist and a poor tactician who's led his men to destruction. And you see the look, but he's a U.S. Army officer. He can't criticize his former commander. You see the look on his face. John Wayne does a great job. You see the look on his face, the tone of his voice. It's up on YouTube. Anybody wants to see it. The last 4 minutes of Fort Apache, and John Wayne gives this. The whole movie is. But if you just want to see the last 4 minutes, and he gives this great speech. John Wayne gives this great mini speech about the regiment, and it's just never fails to make me cry. It's very touching, and you see John Wayne at his best as an actor. Again, the look on his face, the tone of his voice says it all.
Yeah.
But Fort Apache, great movie. John Ford directed it. Strongly recommended.
Then Rio Grande.
With Maureen O'Hara.
With Maureen O'Hara.
They made a lot of movies together. That was
They made like 6 or 7 films together. She was very dear to him. One of my favorites, The Quiet Man, which is like totally different.
Yes.
Irish boxer,
Totally Irish American. He's American.
Yes, Irish who goes to Ireland, and the brother does not want him to marry her.
Played by Victor McLaughlin, superbly. Who was in a lot of those John Wayne movies. That was directed by John Ford, also, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. And so Maureen O'Hara would say she and her husband would always invite John Wayne over, and she cared for him at the very end of his life. She was integral to having him get the Presidential Medal of Honor. And she said,
and Elizabeth Taylor also, I think, stood up for John Wayne to get.
So Maureen O'Hara says, we'd always try to get him, we'd always invite him over, and we'd try to get him to sample different kinds of dishes, but he'd always only eat steak. Is that John Wayne or what?
That's beef. It's what's for dinner, Simple guy, meat, potatoes.
That's it.
Right, that's fine.
So let's move on to The Searchers. Which is an epic. Here again, we alluded to it. This has led. So the story of The Searchers,
1956, right?
56, yeah.
So Duke's 49. I'm sorry, what did you say, Robert?
The Mickey Mantle year, right?
Oh yeah. Mickey Mantle won the Triple Crown.
Yeah. So what are they searching for? Well, this tribe took this little girl.
The Comanches.
The Comanches took them, and they're searching. John Wayne is leading, and who was the other? Was it Jeffrey Hunter?
Jeffrey Hunter.
Jeffrey Hunter. Those beautiful eyes, and
I didn't notice.
Right. So
I noticed Natalie Wood as a squaw wearing lipstick in the movie.
Of course, I don't mean it that. I think of him as Jesus Christ as King of Kings, frankly, a couple of years later, and just those really beautiful.
I know. I was just playing with you. I did
No,
notice. I did notice
you-
Jeffrey Hunter is a very good-looking guy.
and that
there's
was,
no
that was what, what they wanted. He was young, he was good looking. But the scene when they go back and they see the smoke, they see the smoke of what had happened from their home is attacked and it was burned. And if you remember, and George Lucas paid tribute to that, when Luke Skywalker in the first Star Wars movie, Obi-Wan Kenobi's telling him to do this and that, and Lucas is like, no, I got to go back home. And he goes back home and he sees the same type of smoke where his family has been killed. Like, that's a direct tribute to the searchers, just showing the impact. We mentioned Orson Welles watching 40 times before he did Citizen Kane, which is largely, called the greatest film ever, like in some of these surveys. But and he watched this movie 40 times.
Stagecoach. He watched Stagecoach 40 times, right?
Stagecoach, but just showing the influence of both Ford and John Wayne, that how later generations.
The Searchers is generally considered, one, the greatest Western ever made.
Yeah.
And two, like in these Film Institute surveys, in every one of them, The Searchers is always in the top 10 of the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah.
It is a great movie. Yeah, you're right. And the Comanches are the bad guys. And, I've read a little bit about the Comanches, and they were a brutal.
They were tough hombres.
What's that?
They were tough hombres.
Oh, tough hombres. Sure. Oh my God. Yeah, warrior tribe. Yeah. And other tribes they conquered brutally, tortured to death. The men, the braves, the warriors of other tribes, they tortured them to death brutally. Kidnapped the women and raped the hell out of sex slaves and everything. The Comanches were brutal, but mighty warriors without a doubt. And and they kidnap, they killed the family. They kidnapped John Wayne's niece, she's like 8 years old, little girl. And we see her, they search for her for 5 years. And when they finally find her, she's 13, 14, played by Natalie Wood, who was a young, big star, in the 1950s, who later on died mysteriously and tragically. Yeah. But her husband, Robert Wagner, is a person of interest in a homicide case that never ends. But that's another story.
That's a saga we won't go into.
Because I don't know what happened. She died tragically, but she was a very good young actress. And John Wayne, what a tough guy he is in this. And he's a racist. He hates the Indians. Not just because they killed his brother and everything. He hates them and thinks they're brutal savages. And when he finds out that his niece Debbie, is married to the Comanche chief Scar, and wants to stay married to him, and she's sending him away. I'm a Comanche now. He's gonna kill her. He pulls out his gun. He's gonna kill her. He'd rather have her dead than living with a buck. He has such contempt for that. And Jeffrey Hunter, this is his adopted sister. He's in front of her. No, you can't, you can't kill him. And again, spoiler alert, guys. At the end of the movie, when they kill Jeffrey Hunter character kills Scar, John Wayne character scalps him because he had scalped all of these white settlers, including Jeffrey Hunter's mother. And presumably John Wayne's brother and sister-in-law and his niece Lucy. They raped it and murdered brutally. So anyway, scalps him. He's on horseback and Debbie's trying to get away, thinking she's going to kill him. And he captures her. And she's punching at him. It's very touching. And you see that there's this change of heart. He scoops her up in his arms and he says, "Let's go home, Debbie." Yeah. It's very touching.
Yeah, it totally is, Andy. And let's go home to the better way of life. So if we talk about John Wayne's in real life, his thought about the natives, the American Indians, whatever term you're going to use, was they should be integrated. He did not like putting them on reservations, where he said it was basically socialism from cradle to grave. Where we think they cannot survive on their own. pretty much the left assumes blacks and any minority, they're too inferior, they can't integrate, they're not smart. And John Wayne disagreed with that. He disagreed with that idea. He was like, no, they can integrate. I've seen firsthand good examples.
And many have leave the reservation. It's still a free country.
Yes.
Many Indians do leave the reservation.
Yeah.
I mentioned.
And if we could say one thing, if we could critique one thing, which is legitimate, and maybe there weren't enough of them, but they always say the Indians were played by American actors. So yeah, it would have been nice if they actually were enough Indian qualified, good actors to actually make it more authentic. I could see that as a criticism, but who knows how many of them went into acting.
Years later, Clint Eastwood in Outlaw Josie Wales. What was it, Chief Dan George? Was that the dude's name?
That's right.
Was in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah. A great Clint Eastwood Western. Outlaw Josie was. But yeah, you're right. In John Wayne's era, 20 or 30 years early, I don't know how many American Indians there were in Hollywood in the acting profession.
Yeah. So just going quickly.
But let's stay with the searches for just a minute, because it's as a minor point. I noticed when I was rewatching the searches last week, the first time you see Debbie, as a teenager, not a little girl, but when the first time Natalie Wood appears on screen, she's Scar's wife. She's her hair is done up as an American Indian score. I know she's wearing lipstick. I just wondering, did the American Indian women have lipstick, or is that just is that just Natalie Wood being a Hollywood star? I can't appear on screen without my lipstick.
Right.
I don't. I'm guessing it's the latter.
I think it's the latter. Yeah. I mean, her first movie, or one of her early movies, Miracle on 34th Street, she was like 5 years old in that, and she didn't have lipstick back then. But we could talk about Natalie Wood. It's one of the first females that I've ever seen in my life where I'm like, that is a woman.
Yeah,
She was. I like that. West Side Story
girl.
Is.
And Rebel Without a Cause with the great James Dean.
Everything she's in. I mean,
Natalie Wood was a beautiful young woman and a talented actress, and she died way
Natasha
possibly murdered as it turns out. But anyhow, she has a change of heart, because at first she tells them she wants to stay with the Comanches, doesn't want to go back to a more civilized way of life. But then she's ready at the end of the movie to go back. But it's the John Wayne character who has the big change of heart. Is that he's really, what choices did she have? She's kidnapped by the Comanches. If she refuses to go along with them and marry they'll rape her and murder her like they did her sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Not like she had any choices. I think at some point the John Wayne character realizes that. And anyway, so she was married to an Indian chief. He's not like she committed murder. They may have, but she didn't. And so he's let all that go. She's still my niece. She's a good person.
Yes.
She's innocent. She's an innocent victim here. Let's go home, Deb. He carries it back. But at the end of the movie, and they come up on horseback to the Jorgensen Ranch to their friends who love her, and they welcome her back home. And everybody's happy. And the John Wayne character walks out the door after all this heroic daring. He walks out the door and he's walking away, and you see his silhouette through the door walking away, because he's the icon of American individualism. And he does all these good deeds, saves his niece's life, brings her back.
Sails off into the sunset.
Right, and rides off into the sunset. I watched that again. I reminded me of Shane. Different circumstances, but Shane rides off into the night alone with a bullet in him. The John Wayne character in the searches walks off alone.
And you mentioned, Andy, the door frame, which is so many scenes are filmed through this doorway of that movie. Another technique that John Ford used, which was copied over and over again. But especially that last one. But if you think of his change of heart, they're searching for 5 years. He finally does see her, and he grows psychologically throughout that endeavor, because he just has rage and passion, which frankly most people would have. I would have that, and initially, so, if I witnessed what the brutality that happened, and knowing the lone survivor is now captured and being forced to live with the enemy, and then knowing that they actually want it, they're brainwashed enough to actually want to stay. So very deep film psychologically,
Yeah, it
I
is.
think.
And John Wayne gives a magnificent performance. He should have been nominated for Best Actor. He was nominated a few times. I can't remember which of his early movies he was.
Yeah,
But he should certainly have been at least nominated for Best Actor for The Searchers, if not outright won it, because he's at
yeah,
least as good in that movie as he was, years later in 12 or 13 years later in True Grit, which he did
right.
win the Oscar. He's great.
Yeah,
He's great in The Searchers. I want to say this out loud.
yeah.
John Wayne is great in The Searchers. Nobody could have played that role better than John Wayne. I don't know if anybody could have played it as well as he did. And he's in all these great John Ford movies, and John Ford gets the credit he properly deserves. And never, all these people who belittle John Wayne as an actor, they ever stop and think why, John Ford wanted John Wayne in these movies, aside from the fact that he was a big movie star and box office draw. That's part of it. John Wayne's great in these roles.
3 decades in a row, Andy, he was the leading box office, figure. So,
he's got an iconic line, an iconic John Wayne line in The Searchers. When I think the Ward Bond, who's in a lot of John Wayne movies, always great, plays the preacher, captain of the Texas Rangers. Ward Bond's terrific. At one point, he asks the John Wayne character, "You want to quit?" And John Wayne says, "That'll be the day." And the way he says it, spacing out the word,
yeah,
for emphasis. That's a John Wayne characteristic.
The one-liners, yeah.
And he's terrific. The way he delivers those lines is so convincing. He's so good in those kind of roles. Like I said, probably not going to play Hamlet on stage, but in those kind of hero roles he plays, nobody's better.
Yeah. Yeah, so just real fast, let's knock out a couple of his other ones. The Alamo, he does 1960. It's a labor of love.
Was that one of the movies he was not? That was one of the movies he was nominated for Best Actor.
Yeah,
wasn't it? Where he plays Davy Crockett. I remember that movie. I saw it in the movie theaters when I was a kid. I liked it, and John Wayne was great, but The Searchers was much better. He did a much better.
Yeah. And the film, The Alamo, actually lost money. He wanted to be a producer because he thought there was actually more money in producing. Then 1962, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance,
Jimmy Stewart,
which is also known as the greatest.
That's a great movie.
It's competition of which one is the greatest Western.
That's a great movie. Was that John Ford also? Was that Howard Hawks?
I think it was. I'm not going to commit. I think
it was John Ford, not Howard Hawks, but I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
But I know this. I saw it in the movie theater, and I've seen it since. Yeah. Jimmy Stewart, who's always great. Lee Marvin, who was just becoming a star.
What a cast.
John Wayne. Yes, it's a great Western. The story is so. The story, of course, is so good, and the director, I think, was John Ford. As always, does a great job with it. Yeah.
So then he comes on. Now we're into the 1960s, and the change. The anti-war movement is gaining traction. He does not like the direction of the country, so he makes the Green Berets in late 60s, 1968.
Yeah, I remember the Green Berets.
I remember seeing that. On TV, on the Late Show or the afternoon, the 4:30 movie. Remember that? Channel 7.
$1 Million movie on Channel 9. And I remember that.
The $1 Million movie had Gone with the Wind soundtrack.
That's right.
Always remember.
Tara's theme.
That's amazing. We go. I feel sorry for young people because this was the golden age. They refer to it. This was the golden age of Hollywood, and so 68 is 68 is Green Berets, and then 69 is True Grit, and finally he's recognized. Barbra Streisand. He goes. Gary Cooper had won. Was it High Noon?
Yes, Gary Cooper won High Noon.
There was one Academy Award where John Ford won, and Gary Cooper won, and John Wayne actually accepted the award for both of them, but he himself was not even nominated. Okay, and so it was interesting there that he was on stage receiving Oscars, but not until 1969.
Why weren't Cooper or John Ford able to accept for themselves?
Both of them, John Ford didn't like the whole drama, and he bailed out, and he already had 7 of them. And Cooper was either sick or something,
I see.
and they were friends. Although he disagreed. John Wayne was not a fan of High Noon. He was offered the role. He turned it down.
I know.
He didn't like when the.
I know. He told Gary Cooper. He said, it's a great, and High Noon's a great movie, just artistic.
Yeah,
it's a great movie.
Yes.
The Grace Kelly character, who's a pacifist. First of all, she's Grace Kelly. She's a beautiful woman, great actress. She's a pacifist, a Quaker, but the way she transforms in that movie to defend her man. It's a great movie. But yeah, John Wayne said to his buddy Gary Cooper, he said the American people would help. They wouldn't leave you. They wouldn't hang you out to try that way. That's not an accurate depiction of the American people. And several years later, he did Rio Bravo, which was John Wayne's version.
His contrast to that.
Yeah, right.
And then
where the townspeople all chip in to help out the marshal against the bad guys.
Yeah. So let's just stay to his Oscar, his moment of glory, and then I'll follow up on that because I have another story similar to that. So he wins as Rooster Cogburn with his, he's got the eye patch on, and I think his daughter was playing golf, and she swung and hit him in the eye, and that's why he had this big eye patch, and he called her like the queen of the 9-iron after that. So, but what's the thing he says when he gets the award? He's like, if I would have put on this eye patch 30 years ago, I would, if I would have known this was coming, I would have put this eye patch on 30 years ago and saved myself of all this drama. But they all recognized him for sure. That was certainly a moment of glory in his life, and Bob Hope is there.
A whole bunch of things. There's so many things to say about Duke. First of all, True Grit, the novel, Charles Portis wrote the book.
Yes, good book, really good book.
Terrific,
really good book.
Terrific
you're
book.
right.
It's like Shane. It's a terrific Western.
Yeah.
The girl,
from
Maddie,
the girl's perspective, right? It's completely from the girl's perspective.
And she is a real heroine. Yeah, she is a real heroine. She's determined. That low down polecat who murdered my father. I'm going to get vengeance on him, man. And she does. And Kim Darby plays the role magnificently. And what's her name? Haley Steinfeld in the Coen Brothers remake with Jeff Bridges was also great in the remake of.
I did like the remake as well. You're right.
Yeah, I loved it. I was shocked at the Coen Brothers, who were both touched in the head. They made such a great Western. And Jeff Bridges was the great Jeff Bridges was just as good in that role as John Wayne.
I agree.
He was great.
I agree.
Jeff Bridges was great, but so was John Wayne. And so it's a terrific Western. I don't think it's his best, but but it's great, and he got the Oscar that he deserved. And after that, and his very little known remake, the Rooster Cogburn in 1975
with
Katharine Hepburn. And then the last movie after that, The Shootist, with Lauren Bacall. And
Jimmy Stewart.
That's Jimmy Stewart. That's right. And I wanted to
who was too old to read it, to know his lines. They had to yell the lines to him because he was hard of hearing by that time. Yeah, shame. But he wanted to do it. He wanted to wrap it up. Everyone knew that was his last movie. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's still James Stewart, right? He still has that gravitas.
Yes.
But I want to talk about his interactions with the great Katharine Hepburn, with the great Lauren Bacall, as part of John Wayne's acting ability. But that's 6 or 7 years after True Grit. So there was things in between you wanted to mention.
Well, so Clint, let's talk about Clint so John Wayne wanted to play Dirty Harry, but he was actually too old for the role. He was like 64.
He's in his 60s. He's in his 60s.
Yeah. And he did not like High Plains Drifter for the same reason that he didn't like High Noon. He didn't, in High Plains Drifter, the climax is where the whole town cowers to these 3 bad guys. Clint Eastwood sets them up to defend themselves, and they all cower. And so here's John Wayne's opinion, whether it's accurate or not, of the American sense of life and the possibility of the American fighting spirit in 2 incredibly well done films. He disagreed because he thought the Americans would stand up.
Yeah,
And
High Noon with Gary Cooper and High Plains Drifter with Clint Eastwood.
with Clint Eastwood, yeah, yeah. And another thing about him as an actor, one of the directors, wasn't the famous ones, John Ford or Howard Hawks, wanted him to actually shoot somebody in the back. And he said, I never shoot anyone in the back, so he's got this moral character that, no, I'm a man of justice. I don't shoot people in the back. But as times are changing, Andy, there was a little bit of interaction between him and Clint. Clint had a script that he wanted John Wayne to be in, and it never amounted to anything. And the two never, Eastwood wanted it to happen because they were also on the right. In a town where everything is left and farther left, they were on the right. Yes. So, but to that effect, I do want to say one other thing, Andy. Harvard Lampoon. Do you know this story?
About the worst actor award?
Yeah, they award him the worst actor, the brass balls award they give him. He goes up to Harvard. Okay, it's in the winter, and he goes on this tank. And his head is above, everyone on his way into the auditorium. People are throwing snowballs at him. And he's like, I'm the Duke, goes into the place. There's some booze, but these college age students, who are very far left, anti-war. And I'll say something about the war, Vietnam. Well, I'll just say this. His point about the Vietnam War, he was pro-Vietnam War in one sense. Go in, win the war, and get out. So in that sense, I totally agree with him.
Yeah,
you don't drag this thing out.
Defeat communism.
Yes, and get out and move on with your life. So they're yelling at him, they're heckling him during he's in the auditorium, and one of them says to him, is that toupee your real hair? And he goes, the hair is real, but it's not mine.
Right. Right.
And it's like he ends up with a standing ovation because these teenagers see they're in the presence of a man larger than life. Like this is where
Robert, you're absolutely right. I found on YouTube this tribute to John Wayne where I had a whole bunch of Hollywood people. Lauren Bacall was one,
yes.
Robert Aldrich, James Caan, Robert Duvall. I can't remember, all the people, who pay tribute to Duke. They all said how they loved them. Most of them Hollywood lefties who felt compelled to start up by saying, I disagreed with Duke on every political issue.
They always say that. Yeah, they always start with that.
They have to differentiate themselves from John Wayne's political stance.
Yeah.
But they go on to say, what a terrific actor he was and what a great guy he was. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, referenced that and said anybody who won that award just kind of cowered. Nobody went to accept it,
That's right.
But that John Wayne actually went to accept it, worst actor of the year award or whatever, impressed the hell out of these Harvard kids. It takes backbone to go up, and do such a thing. And John Wayne, everybody who knew him, everybody who commented in this, you can find it on YouTube in this John Wayne testimonial, talk about what a charming person John Wayne was. What a warm-hearted, good guy. How everybody loved him. What a pleasure to work with. A real professional actor. And he just charmed these kids. And they ended up applauding the guy whose political stance they completely disagreed with. That's a great American. A great American story.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we talk about, he had cancer earlier in life, and there's some evidence that it was from filming, I think in Utah or Nevada, near some nuclear site. A lot of the actors ended up with cancer. And then his children opened up this hospital for cancer treatment that has saved many, many lives since it was founded.
The fact that John Wayne was a heavy smoker and heavy drinker might have contributed.
I think that helped. You're right, Andy. I think that added to the equation. You're right. I think that was a big factor. But so we get to the Academy Awards 1979, and Johnny Carson's there, and he calls out John Wayne, and it's absolutely the last hurrah. He dies.
Yeah, it's like 2 weeks before his death. Well, maybe a few months before his death.
And he's frail, and everyone is sad because they're used to seeing this big, strong man.
Yeah, he's Duke.
Yeah. and but Sammy Davis, jumps in and performs, and it's they sent him out on the right note, and he said, if I would have gotten sick before, I would have taken this invitation earlier. It's like they finally recognize the man, for what he's done.
He's an icon of Hollywood. And,
Yes.
and a very underrated actor. I'm going to stand by
Yeah.
that assessment till the day I die. And by the way, so Rooster Cogburn, 1975, his only role, co-starring Katharine Hepburn, who said, she was considered for Hondo, another Western that John Wayne made in the early 50s, but she opposed John Wayne politically on the blacklist.
They did not like each other politically. Yep.
Yeah. So she turned that role down. But she said in 1975, they're both 67 when they did Rooster Cogburn.
Wow.
And the critics didn't like that movie. Yeah. I don't remember from at the time, but I watched it, on Amazon Prime recently. I liked it. It was fun. It's the sequel to True Grit. And Katharine Hepburn said it was a pleasure to work with John Wayne, whatever our disagreements are. He's a real professional. Yeah. And I saw Lauren Bacall, on this tribute to John Wayne. Because Lauren Bacall did 2 films with John Wayne. In 1950, she did Blood Alley, which is a really fun movie. I love Blood Alley, set in communist China, in 1950s. And John Wayne's helping this whole village. The John Wayne character is helping this whole village of Chinese escape the communists to freedom in Hong Kong. It's a terrific movie. And then 20 years later, she did The Shootist, with John Wayne.
That's right.
His last film, when he plays a character, a gunfighter who's dying of cancer, when he himself, was
Ron Howard too, right?
Yeah, Ron Howard, Jimmy Stewart, like you said, who's the doctor. And I just watching, the way, because Lauren Bacall is a great actress. I mean, she's a great actress. Katharine Hepburn's a great actress. These are all-time Hollywood greats. And you watch these 2 films, Rooster Cogburn and The Shootist, and you look at the interaction between the characters, and John Wayne holds his own. I mean, his dialogue with these 2 great actresses, he's very good. He's a very professional actor, and he never got the full credit he deserved. But I love Lauren Bacall's tribute to John Wayne. I guess she starts off by saying, "We didn't agree on anything." She said, and yet she says something like, "But Duke and I clicked." She said, "We just clicked. That chemistry was there between us. We just, and he was a real pleasure to work with. A gentleman, a professional actor. You can see she was very." And all these people, they all said Robert Aldrich. Oh, I got to mention Bruce Dern, who's a real leftist.
Yes.
He said Duke and I disagree on everything, but the interview asked him, but he said, "Oh, I loved it, Bruce Dern." I love John Wayne. He said that in the Cowboys, they made the film together. The Bruce Dern character is going to kill the John Wayne character. It's one of the few westerns where the John Wayne character gets killed. He said, Duke says to me, "Bruce," he says, "they're going to hate you all over the country." And Bruce Dern says, "Yeah, Duke, but they're going to love me in Berkeley."
That's right. That's true.
And he said, and Bruce Dern says, Duke laughed. He thought that was, was so funny. So John Wayne was loved in Hollywood, generally. Yeah.
Let me just, speaking of Andy, so one quote, somewhat long quote from Jack Nicholson, 1986. He says, "It's just like I always said, John Wayne as an actor was more important to the mass psyche than any single American president. His penetration, his longevity, and all that ultimately has affected how human beings behaved, what choices they make, who they think they are, more than any straight pragmatic political action or groupthink. So here's the rugged individualist who outlasts president after president, and who knew Ronald Reagan as a B movie actor, but didn't live to see Reagan become president. And that's his legacy. We just spent last week in Uray, the site of Galt's Gulch, and there's a museum there. There's an antique shop called Outlaw, and it's got John Wayne figure with a hat and all the memorabilia and stuff. So Americana as well, Monument Valley in Utah. You think of him and John Ford, this beautiful, horizon, and just the frontiersmen. if we think how many of us, Andy, can go out into the wilderness and create a life, this is a lost art. I mean, some people do it. I'm not saying it's nobody does it anymore, but it's a hard thing to do in this current society of comfort and convenience. But what was the stage until we went, from sea to shiny sea? John Wayne's character was
Yes.
the type of individual who went out there and settled the land and
Yep.
help America to become
No,
what it is.
absolutely right. The John Wayne character stands for American individualism and frontier justice. I mean, he was
Yeah.
almost always the good guy, protecting the innocent against,
Yes.
bandits, criminals, warlike Apaches or Comanches or in the Indian tribes. So I want to make one criticism of John Wayne, and that is that Playboy interview he did in the early 70s.
That's right.
He's received a lot of criticism for it, and justly so, I think, because he says something like, I support white supremacy until the blacks are educated and and can be responsible for their own lives. Okay, he thinks he's supporting education for blacks. Okay, fine, but Duke, by 1971, whatever year that was, you should know better than to associate.
You should know better, and I hope Playboy actually quoted him right, because that's part of the thing. I'm always skeptical of those. Of those kinds of interviews where they're actually getting him, but that was bad. I think he had the Black Panther in his mind when he's thinking of the violence that they represented, and of course they were communists, so he always had his radar up for that kind of thing. But he's dead wrong. He's dead wrong, and we call him out on that.
Yeah, we have to call him out on him because this is early 70s. What white supremacy actually meant is well known by that time. It means, first of all, that whites are biologically, morally superior, morally and intellectually superior based on bloodlines, which is just pure racism. Pure racism, and it's completely false. And it stands for slavery, Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan, lynchings, and so on and so forth. All done by Democrats, by the way, Duke. And you're a Republican.
Yep.
The Republicans properly oppose that. You should not associate. You should not never have said that. You should. But anyway,
I agree.
He's dead wrong.
He's dead wrong in that, no doubt. One time on the set, the director called a black man the N-word, and John Wayne let him have it.
Yeah,
Okay?
John Wayne was not a racist in his.
He did not like that word. He had 3 interracial marriages. Okay, so if we look at
Latina,
right? But I'm saying, if we look at the quote from a magazine, which could be accurate, could not be accurate, compared to, and then look at what the man actually did in life. It's very easy to quote people out of context, and this is where I'm not 100%. That quote is never going to go away, and it's going to downplay the actions that the man did, and that's where
I hear. No, I hear you. I hear, Robert. Yeah. In those, and when I was talking about that tribute to John Wayne,
yes,
was one of the Hollywood lefties was saying stuff like, John Wayne, oh my God, is he gonna come out with some comments against the Jews and against the Indians? And I was, wait a minute. And John Wayne was what you're saying, implying that John Wayne was an anti-Semite? I don't know any evidence to, for that. If John Wayne hated Jews, he was in the wrong industry. I'll tell you that. Because the truth is, every Hollywood production company is owned by Jews. And if you don't get along with Jews, you're not gonna get along, with the Hollywood, with the big Hollywood production company. I don't know any evidence that John Wayne hated Jews. And as far as the Indians go, in almost every John Wayne Western, he other than the Searchers, and even the Searchers where he changes his mind right there, he's almost every John Wayne Western I can remember. He's the guy who was always respectful, of the Indians. Mm-hmm. Whereas Henry Fonda is a real racist. I'm not blaming Henry Fonda. He gives a great performance.
Right, that's the role.
That's the role. That's the role. Exactly. Henry Fonda's great, but he's the racist. John Wayne's the guy who stands up for the Apaches, in Fort Apache. So was John Wayne a racist in his real life? Not that I know of. I don't know of any hard evidence to support that.
Yeah, I agree. And again, as you said, Andy, it is important to call out flaws, and which we do, but on the whole, Americana, the frontiersmen, self-reliance, all these things that distinguish America from every other country in the world, this one man personifies it on screen. And I think that makes him worthy as a subject in the hero show.
Yeah, he's an American icon. He inspired me in so many roles, and in real life, the courage and the dignity with which he faced death.
Yes.
You know, he does it in the movies, in The Shootist. You know,
Yeah.
the Jimmy Stewart character, who's an MD, and he examines him and he tells him, you know, this is going to be a painful, agonizing death. And he says, if I had your physical courage, Jimmy Stewart character says to John Wayne character, I would not die this way. And so John Wayne makes sure the John Wayne character gets all the bad guys in town into the saloon. Spoiler alert, gets all the bad guys in town into the saloon, and he's going to go out quickly, relatively painlessly, and in a blaze of glory, you know, ridding the town of these real bad guys. And it's just perfect. It's a perfect epitaph for John Wayne's film career. And Lauren Bacall is right. You know, she's very good in the movie, as she always is. The interaction between Duke and Lauren Bacall is very good. And you know, she's absolutely right. He is a consummate professional, you know, in the work that he does. And I think John Wayne, American icon, man of American individualism, of frontier justice. Duke, thank you for all the inspirational movies you made.
Yes.
Thank you for this larger than life, literally and figuratively, embodiment of the great American hero. And everybody out there in Hero Land, I hope we can all strive to lead more heroic lives. And we'll be back next week once again on the Hero Show.
See you then.